Jim, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. You were the mayor here for 6 years and a lifetime resident. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Delighted to be here, delighted at the subject.
I'm going to start off broad brush strokes with the overall context within the Queenstown Lakes District and the current state of housing. How would you describe that to somebody who was new to town?
Okay, so for many, many years, we've had a housing problem here, housing affordability and housing availability problem. People talk about housing as though it fits under one headline. It's not. At the lower end of the scale, we have the migrant workers, the people doing their OEs coming here, working for 6 months and then carrying on their overseas trip somewhere different. Further up the chain, still in the migrant workers, we have the folk who come here on a work visa. They're here for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever. And then there are, of course, the people who want to live here permanently, and how are they accommodated? So it is definitely not one problem. It's a number of items that make up a housing problem. But you ask me, what is the state here? It's quite dire. We have the most expensive housing in New Zealand. The average house price last time I looked was, I think, somewhere around $1.75 million for a house. Go out to what I would call family suburbs, such as Shotover Country, Lake Hayes Estate, and you'll find that probably the cheapest house you can buy is kind of $1.2 million, and you'll find houses in those areas, 4-bedroom, double garage, nice houses that are north of $2 million these days. So my problem with this is that we need people to live here and work here. And this is the policemen, the truck drivers, the people who work in the shops, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're an ordinary income family with 1.5 parents working, 2 or 3 kids, and you want to carry on a reasonable lifestyle, how on earth do you afford to buy at those sort of prices? And so for the greater good of this place, we have to do something about it. This is not a nice to, this is a must do.
So I'm hearing you say that for some parts of the community, your housing system is not serving them particularly well. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And this is not a new problem. It's been building for some time, but it used to be that there were a lot of kind of lower grade houses that were available for the workers coming to town who would rent a room in a house. A lot of those properties have now been taken up in visitor accommodation with Airbnb. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying anything against Airbnb, it's just the reality of where we are. So those houses have gone, so the people that were there are trying to find another place to go, and so on, up and up and up the stream it goes. Bottom line is, not enough houses and too expensive.
So tell me, because you've been here 42 years living in the community, what's the role that the state is playing in terms of providing adequate housing for low and moderate income residents in the community here?
Oh, there's an unfortunate presumption in the halls of government departments that Queenstown is full of rich folk and we can solve these problems ourselves without any input from central government. The reality is a large portion of our population are struggling and they need some assistance. Government had some state houses here in the 1970s, 80s, sold them off in the 1990s on the basis they weren't required. Short-term thinking. But look, this is not just a government issue.
Okay.
This is a council issue, a government issue, and an employer issue to resolve. And property owners, property developers have also a big part to play in this.
Interesting. So let's transition now from broad brushstrokes around the current state to perhaps a desired future state. What mechanisms are you seeing at play here that give you hope of a better future? What does that look like in terms of things that might be working well that you could do more of?
Right. So the current initiative around inclusionary zoning is a really good step in the right direction. Let me say, I'd much rather it had a different name than inclusionary zoning, because I've mentioned the word inclusionary zoning and people have zero idea what I'm talking about. But go back to 2013, and there was an act of Parliament called the Housing Accord and Special Housing Areas Act 2013. And in very round terms, that's what's trying to be recreated with inclusionary zoning. The HASHA legislation, as it was called, enabled government and councils to fast track housing consents in exchange for the developer giving up a portion of the sites or a portion of the value from the sites for affordable housing. And that was a great mechanism. And we had many subdivisions that were created in this district and did a lot towards making affordable housing available through that legislation. Unfortunately, it got shut down by a subsequent government. I think that was a mistake. What we're now trying to do is to say that blanket across the district, if you are developing property here, a portion of either the sites created or the value of the sites created must go towards affordable housing. And so naturally, property developers aren't that keen on the idea, and I understand that, having done a bit of property development myself in the past. But putting everything aside, that is the only mechanism I can see currently on the table to enable the creation of more affordable housing. And I'm going to put inverted commas around affordable housing because it's never going to be cheap. There's another idea that comes into this, which I'll come back to in a minute. But council, while I was still the mayor, initiated this process. They've recently had hearings on it. Been a lot of interest in it, a lot of submissions put for and against. I'm really looking forward to seeing the outcome of that, because I think this could be the catalyst for at least beginning to solve the problem here and for much of New Zealand.
Jim, I'm interested if you could help us, please. Some of our viewers won't understand the actual mechanics of how the value and capture occurs with this zoning situation. Could you just walk it through for a layperson in terms of how that works?
So property developer comes along, he says, I've got this piece of land and I want to create 200 sections on it. Great. Council goes through the consenting process, and in the consenting process considers whether it's desirable, what the zoning is, et cetera, and then approves it. A condition of approval under inclusionary zoning is that a percentage of the sites created or the value from it is then taken and given to the housing trust, to the Queenstown Lakes District Housing Trust, Affordable Housing Trust, to be put into an affordable housing program. Now, there's a cost to that, and property developers will argue that they will need to pass on the cost of this to into the sections that are created for other people. Yep, don't argue with that, and that's the case. But yes, there's a downside to everything, and I think the downside is low compared to the value created and the number of sections that will be made available. Housing Trust has a big part to play in this, because they're going to make sure these properties go to the right places and that somebody just doesn't build a house on it, and then pop off out of the district and pocket some hundreds of thousands of dollars within a short period of time. And that happened in the past with other housing programs that we had in the district in the past. Moved on from that now, but yeah, it's a bit of a blunt axe, but I think it's an effective one.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the upside, the benefits that come out of that, because it seems from the outside looking in that there's a real issue here, particularly for key workers living in Queenstown, Wanaka and other areas here, which are dominated to a large degree by perhaps more transitory tourist activity as opposed to permanent residents. I don't know the mix of residences, but presumably you're helping people who are on low and moderate incomes stay as part of the community. Is that one of the outcomes?
Yeah, that's basically it. Define me what is a key worker in this district. It can be anything from a nurse to somebody who cleans pots in a restaurant, because they're all key workers. The economy depends on them all being here. People's welfare depends on them being here. So it's difficult to say who's important or not. But anyway, everybody's important. Everybody should be able to have a place to live. And look, just on the affordability angle as well. Call me a Chardonnay socialist, but life is more than working 3 jobs to be able to afford a place to live. And a family has a reasonable expectation that they'll have a place to live that they can afford. And yes, you have to work hard to get there. But, they've got to be able to have a bit of time off and go and play some sports or go for a walk in the hills in the weekends, and not be simply working every day of the week to put a roof over your head.
So with average property prices for your average home in the Queenstown Lakes area being north of 1.7 million, the numbers are quite scary quite quickly. Can you, from your experience, both during your time as mayor and prior and subsequent, I'd like to, have you had a look at international examples of things that have worked well like this? Because we're aware that inclusionary zoning or inclusionary housing, or the capture of affordable housing for the benefit of the community, is quite a widespread international norm. It's not something radical or new, yet here in New Zealand, you're the only region where this is common practice. And it seems to me an example of extraordinary leadership from local government in particular.
Oh, look, so back in my time in council, we had umpteen debates about this, and we had a look at what was being done around the rest of New Zealand and around the rest of the world, and we couldn't come up with a better answer than inclusionary zoning. At the time, council decided to put inclusionary zoning legislation in place. We knew that council would be in for a hell of a fight. And in fact, I penned a letter to every other council in New Zealand saying, bottom line is, we're going to have this fight, but gee, you guys better help out here, because you're going to get the benefit if we win.
So talk me through, because you've taken a huge and bold decision and risk in doing that. We as Community Housing Aotearoa support that deeply, in the extent that we're arguing with the central government that it should be centrally legislated to reduce the risk for you at the local level. Would that be helpful in your view?
Oh, completely. Why should a small council be having this fight and meeting the cost of it? This is something that should be national.
Right.
It's a bit silly that it's not.
Can I ask, from your experience as a long-term resident in the communities here, do you sense that things are getting better or worse? And when I mean better or worse, I'm talking about the divide that we see in some of our communities, but that naturally occurs between those who own assets and those who don't. What have you seen on the streets here?
Look, I turned up here in 1982. and population then was 3,000. It was a very small town. In fact, people said, why do you want to move to that little one-dog town for? Turns out it's been really good. But smaller town, much less activity, and people hadn't woken up to the attractiveness of the district at that point in time. So things were cheaper. Plus, we owned a hotel company in the late 1980s, and the accepted model for employing people in those days was to have a lot of staff accommodation. We probably accommodated a half of the people who worked for the company. Since then, the district has been recognised as one of the most attractive parts of the world to live in. And you've only got to go and take a look out the window to see why people want to be here. Fatally attractive, maybe. And so that's caused a whole lot more people to come here, driven up property values. Somebody once said to me, oh, you need to slow development, or you need to stop development. So how do you do that? We live in a democracy. If somebody wants to develop a piece of land and they have the zoning for it and they can afford to do it, there's nothing to stop them. And that's the way it happens. And if somebody in Auckland decides, or Wellington or Christchurch decides they want to move here, what are we going to do? Go and put a fence across the road? Can't do it. So council's job is to accommodate increasing population through providing proper infrastructure. And that's the way it is. And it will continue to grow. And there is very little we can do about it apart from managing the infrastructure to accommodate the growth. And it's an unfortunate fact of life that it is so attractive that it will attract higher prices. There is another tick to the box on this. Are you aware of the Housing Trust Secure Home model?
Yeah, if you would help our viewers, I think it would be really great because it's quite unusual in the sense that it takes the land out and parks that permanently off to the side.
Right. So there's a connection here between inclusionary zoning and secure home, because a lot of the land that would become available through inclusionary zoning will be used for secure home. So go back to 2018, and we had a mayoral task force on housing here, how to find a way to resolve the problem, how to make housing affordable. Looked at all sorts of things, and we had some great input. We had the CEO of a bank, we had property developers, we had economists, etc., who all gave their time for nothing to sit round a table and try and nut this out. The best idea we came up with was secure home. And the promise of secure home is that it is a nest, not a nest egg. And so this is saying, right, the land will stay in the trust in perpetuity, build a house on it. You can buy the house, but you don't buy the land. You pay a peppercorn rental on the land, but you're there forever. Now, it doesn't increase in value beyond the inflation rate. So you're not getting a capital gain on it.
Mm-hmm. So there's a CPI adjustment, is there?
Yep. But you are, let's say you borrowed money to buy it. You're paying that off, so you're creating value there. But the best part is that you're not subject to a landlord coming along tomorrow and saying, sorry, but your rent is going up by $100 next week, or sorry, I've decided I'm going to sell the house, so I want you out in a month's time. You are there with your family forever and ever, or until you want to move on. And so the trust has created, I think about 60 or 70 of these properties. The desire is to create 1,000 of them in the district, but inclusionary zoning is a big step on the track to providing this secure home model. And you would not believe the number of folk who have ended up in one of those secure homes who still stop me when I'm in the supermarket and say, thank you, I'd have never got a home if it wasn't for this.
Yeah, brilliant. And there's so much research now to show the directly attributable benefits of security of tenure are almost equivalent to independent home ownership anyway. So it's
that just the security factor of this is ours, we're not going to get kicked out. I mean, imagine living thinking, I'm here this month, I might not be here next month. How am I going to shift the family, etc.?
Yep.
I've got a view that shifting house is right up there with divorce and death in the family. So, for these folk, having to shift several times a year is pretty awful.
With the secure home product, it's wonderful to think that someone can stay for as long as they want to and that they've got the security of tenure. Could you explain to our viewers what happens if they do need to depart and go for a job somewhere else or move their family? What happens?
No problem. House gets sold back into the Affordable Housing Trust and is then available for somebody to buy at the same price. So it is staying in step with inflation. So, $2024 with inflation adjusted would be the same in 2034.
Over time, though, if you think of the mathematics there, that's still going to remain a very, very affordable product compared to what's available on the open market.
Oh, completely. It really, really is a wonderful product. And, being honest with you, I'm surprised more councils haven't picked up on it. I'm surprised central government haven't picked up on it.
Allow me for a moment to go below the line in the sense that I'm wondering if you'd be prepared to describe what life for the communities of this region would look like if we simply don't address the underlying housing crisis. There are alarming signs in the media almost on a daily basis. There's a growth of NIMBYism, and particularly with regards to Kāinga order projects around the country, where there seems to be some form of resentment directed at low-income households. If we don't intervene, because obviously subsidised housing requires a subsidy, so there are roles for all of us to play in that context: central government, local government, and members of the community and business. What does it look like in a dystopian way if we don't actually all work together to try and improve the unmet housing need in our communities?
So the ultimate outcome, if that happens, is that no one who works in Queenstown will live here. They will live in satellite towns like Cromwell, like Kingston, elsewhere, and not live in the town. Now, some may say, oh, well, so be it. I'm a strong believer in a community that is made up by all sorts of people at all levels. Doesn't matter religion, economic wealth, blah, blah, blah. And a functioning town has a community that's made up of all those subsections that go through. We have one high school in Queenstown, Wakatipu High School. Very, very good school. Both my children went there. Both my children came through their schooling not seeing any difference between the fact that the kid on one side of them, his father might own umpteen buildings and businesses and whatever. The kid on the other side of him, dad might drive the rubbish truck. That's a wonderful model because they're all sort of on the same playing field. There's no private schools here. There's no difference in their mana. Likewise, different creeds, different ethnic backgrounds, etc. Really good model, and I'm absolutely convinced that the town needs to continue to embrace that. There are 56 different nationalities in the Wakatipu High School.
Yeah, and you've had, I understand, just even up until today, an interesting international sort of case study, let's call it, the mayor visiting from Aspen.
Correct, sister city.
And as the sister city, am I correct to think that the problem in Aspen is even more than it is here? That very few people actually live in Aspen who work there. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. And that's probably the ultimate model that we'd end up with if we don't address this. And look, I think it's changed. Aspen's a wonderful place, but It is Queenstown on steroids when you come to affordability. The mayor there, I had coffee with him yesterday, told me that the price of a day skiing now is sort of about 400 US. A night's accommodation is minimum 400 US. Getting right up there, $100 steaks, etc. Okay.
So, Jim, if you could, because it sounds to me like you're arguing for intervention. It seems from what we've observed around the world and even across the country that to deliver an affordable housing outcome, there needs to be one or more subsidies or some form of intervention. What would you say, and you may have already said it in the recent district plan conversations, what would you say to property developers who are fighting this sort of initiative if you were trying to convince them of the value of inclusionary housing?
I would say I understand exactly your point of view. I understand where you're coming from, but this is about the greater good of the district. And I'm sorry, but it is a pill that's going to have to be swallowed.
Yeah, great. And I suppose in the neoliberal reforms of the late 80s and early 90s, where we perhaps as a country dove into the world where we thought the market would fix everything, what's your view on whether the market will deliver affordable housing outcomes?
I'm the biggest believer in free markets that you could find, but some things need intervention, and housing is one of those. If you look, here's the thing, there's some information available that proves this. Number of houses created in New Zealand per head of population through the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s was right up there. We were doing pretty well. Somewhere about the end of the 70s, I think it was back in the Rogernomics days, the graph went down like that, and we've been below the line ever since. We've got to get back up there. Now, I'm not the world's expert on this, and I'm not going to tell people how to do it, but it needs to happen. And the only tool I'm seeing that's going to help us along the way at the present time is inclusionary zoning.
There have been some substantial high density developments in some of the major urban centres around New Zealand recently, where one could argue that any child coming out of one of those buildings and bumping into their fellow schoolmates might be stigmatised because they are defined by where they live, because people know that they're living in state housing, for example. Could you talk to us a bit about your view on tenure, mixed tenure, blind tenure, and the sort of community that you see?
Look, absolutely. Don't build masses of these things in the same places. If inclusionary zoning gets there, it's a lot over there, it's one over there, it's one over there. And it becomes quite blind then, because you're living in that house, the kid next door doesn't really understand that that's some sort of assisted accommodation, whatever it may be. Really important that. I grew up in Invercargill, and when I was a little kid, am I allowed to tell a story?
Please do.
Okay. When I was a little kid, my parents bought a piece of land to build the first house on that they had ever had. I was number 4 along the way, so they took a while to get there. But the government bought up the other side of the street from where our house was. And you ended up with a street that had a kind of a dividing line down the middle of it. The people who owned their own houses on this side of the street and the people who were in state houses on the other side of the street. And it created that stigma you're talking about, which is just silly. Whereas if they'd been intermixed, it would have been a far better model.
Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that inclusionary zoning lends itself quite well to a more pepper-potted approach. So it's almost built into the system.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. Yeah.
Jim, interested within the housing system, when we look at it as a whole, there are a lot of different parts, moving parts. One of which is the question of the cost to deliver a new home, the improvements above ground, and even the infrastructure under. Any thoughts on that in the New Zealand context?
Oh yes, lots. I understand that the cost of building a house here, square metre for square metre, is about twice what the cost is in Australia. Why? So I'm delighted to see government moving to enable alternative products to come into the country. So, and we've got to be careful here because we don't want junk, but providing stuff meets certain standards. Let's ensure that we have plenty of availability, plenty of product to provide some competitiveness on pricing. Frankly, I don't know why we just don't say to Australia, hey, can we have your standards and adopt them here? Need to be a couple of changes here and there for snow loadings in this part of the world, et cetera, et cetera. But bottom line is let's have some more competition in that. Secondly, we go through such long processes to create approvals for subdivisions, to go through all the hoops that you have to go through. All that gets loaded in. There is a massive amount of cost in stuff that doesn't actually build houses going on here. We've got to find a way to get rid of that. Now, here's another little story for you that gets added onto it. Councils get accused of being slow and difficult when it comes to giving building permits. Well, take this district, little event here over the past 20 years. A developer built several blocks of apartments, and after he had built them, he failed financially. The builder disappeared. The engineer went somewhere different. The architect went somewhere different. And then we had all these apartment buildings ending up with leaky home syndrome. So who ends up meeting the cost of that? Local council. So that cost our council, 2 buildings, our council, somewhere in the order of $100 million. Right. Now, apart from the fact that $100 million could have been spent nicely building infrastructure, bridges and roads and community buildings and whatever else, that means that councils, because they have that liability, are going to be ultra conservative in giving their consents. We're the only country in the world that does that. Why don't we require builders and developers to simply take insurance against that sort of thing happening?
Interesting. And so that's one of the many layers, if you think about the phyllo pastry of costs and processes that make up the cost of delivery. There we're talking about a number of elements, the consenting, but also the materials. Any other reflections on the general topic of housing affordability and how we can, I suppose, at each point almost, where what we're hoping to do is simplify and reduce margin if we're going to ultimately deliver a more affordable outcome?
Yeah, look, again, there's not a magic answer that's going to reduce the cost by 50% tomorrow. But if you take a slice, use your phyllo pastry initiative, take a slice out of that, you might be surprised what happens. You can't make an omelette without breaking some eggs. And, there will be some pain if we fix the problem. But look, again, I wouldn't get too wound up about it because I don't think we're going to turn around and cut the cost of housing by 50% tomorrow. Next year, if we took 3 or 4% out of it, and the year afterwards we took 5% out of it, and so on, we'd find a way around it. As for the GDP out of building stuff in New Zealand, or building houses in New Zealand, investors will find a way to invest their money to still get a return if they're not getting it out of building houses. They'll find a way to make the economic wheels go round.
Is there a question you would like me to ask you that covers a topic that you haven't spoken about that you would really like to?
This might be a little old-fashioned, but when I was a young man, I bought the worst house in a reasonable street, and I put my sweat and labour into doing it up, and sold that and did the same until I ended up with a reasonable house. I wonder if that skill has been lost along the way in New Zealand.
It's interesting you say that because there's some extraordinary initiatives that are up and running around a few places I'm aware of where they're hardwiring those trade training skills into young people who are building houses for their communities. And it's a beautiful cycle because they've got employment and they've got skills and they're building homes for people they know. But they're rare, I would love to see those schemes expanded far more broadly. I
little
take
bit
your
of
point.
little bit of labour of love here,
Yeah, sweat
and
equity.
interesting story. And again, sorry to tell stories.
No, I
but,
love it.
uh, this will age me, but the first house I signed up to buy was for the princely sum of $9,000. And the Southern Building Society at the time required you to have a 1/3 deposit, $3,000. And despite selling my car and cashing up everything I could as a 19-year-old, I could only raise $2,500. I went on my bended knees to the Southern Building Society, and they said, all right, we will lend you $6,500 to buy this house, but a condition is that you paint the house within 6 months of your moving in there. So I duly went away, got the house, painted it. 6 months, almost to the day after I moved into the house, a Jaguar car pulled up outside my gate, and a man in a three-piece suit got out, and he came in, and I was scratching away in the garden. It was Saturday. And he said, Mr. Boult. And I said, yes. He said, I'm Hugh Ritchie, chairman of the Southern Building Society, and I'm here to see if you've painted your house. And I can see you have, and got in his car and drove away again. What a lesson. Undertake to do things, do them.
Jim, thank you for a great interview. We've learned a whole bunch more about the situation here in Queenstown. Look forward to seeing you again sometime.
Thank you. It's a massive problem for New Zealand, massive problem locally here. Delighted to help.